What's going on, guys? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Red Gold Standard podcast. My name is Zach Hernandez, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Matt Llewellyn. Tonight, we are going to be recapping the 49ers' first preseason game of the year versus the Raiders. It was kind of a doozy, but we're going to get all into it. Before I kick it over to Matt, if you guys are tuning in on Twitter, head over to youtube.com/49ers Hive and join from there. It is scrolling across the bottom of your screen, so we could see and interact with your comments. We're not ignoring anything from Twitter. We just can't see it. Go there. While you're there, hit like, hit subscribe. We appreciate all the support as the season's kicking off. But now they got all that out. Matt, how you doing this evening?
I'm doing great, Zach. It's good to be here. Wish you would have done a little bit better game-wise, but in terms of little things that we can take out of it, I think there are some things. But it's just nice to have a game in the books, for better or for worse, and football's back, baby. We don't have to be without football again until February. So it's a good time. It's a good time. One of my favorite times of the year. We get to see, who's going to maybe be on the fringe of the 53-man roster. There's going to be some surprises. There's going to be some disappointments. All in all, though, great time to be a football fan for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And we talked about this on Friday, but best time of the year. Football's back. Cooler weather. Like, everything's just getting so much better. All right. So I think what we have to start, I feel like we're obligated to start off with now legally, is quarterback talk. And obviously the biggest talk coming out of Sunday's loss was Trey Lance's performance, maybe even a little bit of Sam Darnold's performance. Trey Lance obviously finished 10 of 15, 112 yards, 1 touchdown, sacked 4 times, finished with a rating of 111. But Matt, the stats are a little misleading if you actually watch the game. Before I get into it anymore, what was your kind of, overall take from Trey Lance's day?
Yeah, I went through it. Watching it live, I had mixed opinions. Watching it back again, I still had mixed opinions. And then seeing, all 22 footage, it just kind of gave me even more opinions. I think where I'm at with it is that Trey Lance looks like a guy that's unsure of himself, that is afraid to pull the trigger on certain things, that's passed up tight window throws for sure, but throws that are NFL level that he needs to make. And it's clear to me that the best thing that would be for Trey Lance's development would be for him to play. But as I'm sure we'll get into, there's been some comments and there was an article from Albert Breer. I just don't know that that's in the offing for him, no matter how well he plays. Do I think he played great? No. Do I think he played terribly? No. Do I think that he's going to be the starter? Absolutely not. So we can get into it from there, but kind of a mixed bag from Trey Lance. The offensive line did him no favors. There was a lot of just sloppy play. I mean, the whole team played like crap. This was essentially a scrub bowl from minute one, and it's whoever's trying to make the 53-man roster better shore it up quick, because there's a lot of guys there that didn't look like they belonged anywhere near the NFL. So it wasn't all on Trey, but there's definitely some areas where I thought Trey definitely needed to perform better than he did.
Yeah, for sure. And it was really tough to evaluate him fairly with the porous offensive line. It was like, 2 of the first 3 dropbacks, he's getting sacked. And I know people like Grant Cohn are putting out there that it's a conspiracy that Kyle Shanahan was making him throw a lot more to expose him or make him look bad.
That is some of the most silly crap I've ever heard, dude.
I'm just going to say it, like, if it was the other way and we saw Trey Lance hand off 5 out of the first 6 dropbacks, then a lot of people on Twitter would have said, oh, they're not letting Trey Lance throw because they don't want him to outshine Brock Purdy. Like, you really can't win either way. I think what's clear is this kid needs reps. This kid needs throws, and there's no other way to get them but to actually do it. So you put him in there and you say, okay, let's actually see what you can do. And you let him drop back and you let him pass. You let him read the defense. You let him what he can do, see what he can do. And unfortunately, he didn't look great to start. He did look more comfortable towards the end of the first half. Granted, he was still making bad decisions. He should have had 2 interceptions. I know for sure one on that last drive. I don't know. The other one was in the scoring drive where he threw it right to the DB that ended up being a touchdown.
Dude, he really should have thrown 3,
Right.
actually. There was that play where he rolled out and found who's 88? It's not who's 88? Backup tight end.
Is it Fumagalli? No, he's 40.
Yeah, I think it was yeah, I don't know. It was whoever it was. Had to make a hell of a play on the ball, but dude, that thing was a disaster waiting to happen. There was a linebacker right there. That the touchdown pass that he threw should have been an interception, and actually could have been a touchdown if he like throws it earlier, which we can get into. I thought that he was just a tick late on a lot of his decisions, and it just looked like a guy that was like really rusty, hasn't gotten a lot of play time and needs to play. But again, this is year 3. At some point, you gotta kind of just it's tough, tough, and you got to go out there and try to take advantage of your opportunities. But I thought that, and I don't want to hype it up too much because it's just preseason week 1 and whatever. But I thought that Darnold looked, better than Trey Lance did, at least from the fact of he looked more confident when he was out there, But yeah, I just think, I don't know, the whole conspiracy thing is so dumb to me. If you think that Kyle Shanahan is an offensive genius or whatever, or can draw up plays, which for anybody who has questions whether stuff was open, I implore you to go watch the QB school from JT O'Sullivan that broke down the entirety of Trey Lance's day. There was stuff open and he just wasn't pulling the trigger. So I don't think there was any sabotage there. I think that's ridiculous. Great offense beats good defense on any day of the week because the offense has the advantage by rule, by the fact that they know what's going to happen, where the defense has to be reactive rather than proactive like the offense. And if you got a play caller like Shanahan, why wouldn't you want Trey Lance to go out there and see what he can do? And I think a lot of his best plays were when he got out of the pocket and was rolling and in motion. I thought, to be quite honest, Trey Lance looked the most out of his depth on just straight up dropbacks. He did not look prepared for that. So, it is what it is. And, you hope you can go forward and get more out of him. Although it sounds like Darnold is probably going to get a run with the 2s and Trey Lance is going to, be the 3rd quarterback, assuming that Brock Purdy plays at some point, which I also think that he has to play. Reports out of camp or Brock Purdy threw another interception in practice today, even though he was like 14 of 19 or whatever. But there was a significant drop. And with the Albert Breer stuff, it's pretty clear that Brock Purdy is going to be QB1. I don't think it's a competition for QB1. I think it's a competition for QB2. And, in my opinion, I just think that at that point, you might as well keep Sam Darnold and trade Trey Lance, because Trey Lance is not going to get any better just sitting on the bench.
Right. And that's the tough position the 49ers are in. I saw a bunch of people reacting to the Colts announcing that Anthony Richardson is going to be starting the season, saying this is what the 49ers should have done. It's a completely different situation, right? The Colts are basically like, what do we have to lose? Almost nothing. And they have time to allow Anthony Richardson to develop at his own pace. I think the 49ers really were hoping it's like somebody trying to hop on a moving train, They really were hoping that they could just swap out Jimmy for Trey and not have to stop the train or slow down the train at all. But that appeared not to be the case. And it's like last year was the moment where they intercepted. And unfortunately, Trey got hurt. We know how that went.
Right. People were really out there saying that the Colts situation, like the 49ers should have done that with Trey Lance. Dude, the Colts were 4-12-1 last year. Like they were horrific. They were top 5 team picking or whatever. That's wild, because the 49ers were coming off a season where it's like, like 2020 was, we always talk about it, right? It wasn't the revenge tour, it was the rehab tour. And that caused them, because Jimmy Garoppolo got injured with that high ankle sprain that kept him out most of the season and whatnot. And there was a little bit of disconnect between what Jimmy was saying and what the team was saying. I think, honestly, I just think that it's real easy to get into that whole, they should just play Trey Lance right away. But you're talking about a team that prior to the injury to Jimmy Garoppolo was in the Super Bowl, right?
Right.
2020 goes down. Nick Bosa, tears his ACL. Jimmy Garoppolo's injured. Like, it's just a litany of injuries across the board, right? And then you get to 2021, and as opposed to Trey Lance, who played at North Dakota State, at least Anthony Richardson played SEC football. You know what I mean? Like with Florida. So it's a lot different. That's a lot of a huge ask of a world of difference. Power 5 conference versus, whatever. And Anthony Richardson, I believe, was a multi-year starter. So that also plays into it. I mean, what was it? There was there was a quarterback last year or whatever. I think it was Joe Burrow or whatever, threw more pass attempts last year than like Trey Lance had in like his entire career or something like that. It was something ridiculous like that. And it's a hard ask, and it's not a comparable situation at all.
No, not in the least. We got a super chat from Gray Fox 198. Yeah, QB. Where is Nick Bosa?
Yeah, that's a huge problem, I think. And I think that's, when you have all these content creators and Grant losing his mind and absolutely going off the deep end. And, I don't mind saying that because, the things that he's saying is absolutely ridiculous. The way that he's acting is absolutely ridiculous. And one of the things that I'm actually happy about is that people recognize it and are actually pulling receipts, because Grant has said stuff in the past where he's like, what was the one? Kellen Mond is a better quarterback prospect than Trey Lance, and all this stuff like prior to the drafting of Trey Lance. And then it was like, oh yeah, Trey. And then Brock Purdy came in. He's like, Brock Purdy is the real deal, whatever. And now he's like anti-Brock. And it's just so much wishy-washy back and forth type of stuff that it just smacks of somebody who's just trying to like create controversy. But then, he gets into the more kind of salacious stuff, which I don't really feel like getting into. It's just a bad look. And I think it's ridiculous to sit there and pretend that you think that Kyle is trying to tank somebody's trade value so that he can keep him, but he doesn't want to play him. And it's like this 4D chess going on that just seems really stupid. But buried in all that is we don't talk about Nick Bosa, right? We don't talk about the fact that Nick Bosa is still not under contract, and we're going into the second week of the preseason with no Nick Bosa, with no news, with not even a hint. I know that there was a report earlier that the teams aren't very close on a deal or whatever, and then somebody else came out and said that it was false. I knew we talked about that in the chat, but it is a lot about the quarterbacks. I hope that with the pretty much confirmation from that Albert Breer article that Purdy is QB1, we can start to move past this, because there's so many other things that we need to talk about. And listen, if Trey Lance isn't going to play, he's not going to get better. I personally think the team needs to trade him if Brock Purdy actually is QB1, and just keep Sam Darnold and Brandon Allen, because Trey needs to see what he can do. I think the team at this point doesn't believe in him, and I don't think it's right or fair to the kid that he has to stay here and, let's just say worst thing, and Brock Purdy gets hurt. Is Trey Lance going to be ready yet? Obviously, by the gameplay the other day, he's not. So then if he plays bad, do you automatically switch to Sam Darnold? There's no runway here for him. The 49ers have not done well on his development, and it's time to move on.
Yeah, it's a really tough situation. And as far as Nick Bosa, I know you referenced earlier with the comment, there was a report from Tony Pauline of Pro Football Network saying the contract situation between the reigning Defensive Player of the Year and the 49ers is complicated, and he could miss the start of the season. Quote, sources say there's been little communication between the player representatives and their respective teams. I think this is more of there's like a couple of defensive linemen that are waiting to get paid, and I think it's just a matter of they don't want to be the first one because they know they're not going to be the highest. So I think Nick Bosa, I've seen people concerned about him, worried about how he's going to come back. Will he be ready? That dude works out like an animal. Like, I am not concerned with his shape whatsoever. It seems like the 49ers and him have a rough agreement on what the contract is going to look like, and it's just the details that they're still ironing out. Maybe I'm just being optimistic as a fan, but I really do. I believe that that's what the status is at the moment. As far as trading Trey Lance, I agree with you, Matt. It seems like it would be selfish of Kyle Shanahan, and obviously he should be selfish for the team to keep Trey Lance here in case something happens. But I said this in the chat, with our luck, the 49ers will likely need both of these quarterbacks, possibly even all three of these quarterbacks at some point this year. So do you say, I'm sorry, Trey, you're not starting, you're not my backup, but I'm still keeping you and I'm not going to trade you because I'm probably going to need you at some point. So I'm still going to try and get you as ready as possible. I don't know. Maybe that's what Kyle Shanahan's going to be forced to do. Do you want to talk about his comments on Brock Purdy earlier today with Albert Breer?
Oh, I mean, he just essentially said the quiet part out loud. The stuff that we all knew is that he's enamored with Brock Purdy, and Brock Purdy would have to completely melt down to lose the started gig, and they knew after 3 games that he was special, and all this stuff. And it's just it's anything that makes it so Kyle Shanahan doesn't have to do it directly, right? It's always like quoted in like private interviews or whatever, where a lot of this stuff comes out, and it just makes it kind of awkward. They honestly, they really need to just get it together and just announce a starter rather than do it this way. But it made it pretty clear that there's no catching up for Trey, and it's probably something that Trey knew before even the preseason game, and he's kind of just fighting for a backup role. It's just unfortunate that this is the way that everybody finds out, right? The day after the game when we're all talking about performances and stuff like that. It's just unfortunate that this is the way they kind of went about it.
Yeah. So the quote that kind of took Twitter by storm, I guess you could say, is Brock would have to melt in practice to lose the quarterback 1 spot. Days after calling him the real deal, which a bunch of people felt kind of offended by for some reason. But enough about Brock because he didn't play Sunday. So let's get into who did play. We're going to keep the show kind of short because there's not that much good to take out of it. One player that stood out for me, and you'll probably recognize the name because he's a Michigan guy, is Ronnie Bell. I thought he was very impressive. He didn't look that comfortable returning kicks, which I thought was funny. I was listening to I think it's the First and Ted podcast, the one that the 49ers officially puts out. And Lindsay, I think is her name, was talking about how comfortable he looked and how he looked like a natural returning. I'm like, Deshaun Jameson looked very comfortable.
Really, yeah,
not him.
Yeah.
He looked good running routes, and he caught that nice deep pass from Sam Darnold. Who stood out for you? Or unless there's
listen, Ronnie Bell did pretty good. I do think that he had that pretty egregious 5-hole ball, right? That was thrown right to him, that went right through his hands, that led to an interception. I think Brandon Allen threw that ball.
Yeah,
that kind of sucked. But other than that, I thought he was pretty good. I liked on the jet sweep where he just ran through contact, and it was hard to bring him down. I thought that was really good. But you're right, Deshaun Jameson on the returns looked pretty dynamic, and it's just a shame that it seemed like every return he had was a hold, that they had to bring it back, because he was elusive, he was quick, he shot the gap, he got to where he needed to go, and he just looked like a natural out there. So those two definitely were what I thought. I thought that as a depth piece and a low risk signing, I didn't think that Cleveland Farrell was that bad. He had a sack. He had a couple of pressures. I didn't think that he was that bad. And if we can pair Nick Bosa with a Drake Jackson, Cleveland Farrell rotation, and there's growth out of Drake Jackson that we expect, then it could be a nice, low-cost depth signing that the 49ers seem to do every year on their defensive line. So I thought that those were pretty positive. And honestly, a little bit of life out of Ambry Thomas, but nothing that was honestly that impressive. I know Jalen Graham led the team in tackles, but I mean, the Raiders pretty much walked up and down the field. I mean, they made Aiden O'Connell look like he should have been a first-round pick. Right. And it's just inexcusable. The whole team came out flat. I thought this was a super flat performance. It was just one where you look at it and you're like, dang, man, were they at Crazy Horse number 3 all night before they, came out to the game? And, I'm not going to explain exactly what that is, but if you think Vegas, you'll get it. Every phase of the game, the 49ers got mollywopped. Every phase, offensively, defensively, special teams. I mean, I came on the preview show and was like, oh yeah, Jake Moody, dude, automatic. Dude hit one PAT and then all of a sudden just couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. It's just
To be fair,
not great, man.
The second one was 58 yards out, to be fair. First one is kind of inexcusable.
Right. And you hope that I know a lot of people are like, get him out of here, cut him. I think that's a little bit overblown.
Call gold.
Yeah. But I just wasn't super impressed. I will say though, the Sam Darnold throw to, gosh, was it
Bell.
Ronnie
It was
Bell?
Bell, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that ball was perfectly placed.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a beautiful ball. He didn't play perfectly. Obviously, he had some mistakes. I think there was a would-be interception that wasn't. But I thought that overall he looked like he would be a capable backup, right? Like if you were to tell me, independent of Trey Lance, that you were just like, all right, Sam Darnold's going to be the backup, you'd be like, all right, that's not that bad. A spot start here or two. It's probably a little upgrade from like a Colt McCoy level backup. You can deal with that. So I thought that he looked like a steady hand at the very least. Those couple of penalties on his first drive notwithstanding.
I thought he looked pretty good. I thought he got a pretty bad. Am I thinking of the right drive? I think it is where they got a pretty bad ruling. Because then he went for it on fourth down for the quarterback sneak. He just got absolutely stood up. I thought TDP.
Yeah, it looked like TDP got the first down. Yeah, it was a bad spot.
That was unfortunate because that drive was actually going somewhere. And oh well.
I will say this: we're used to really good quarterback sneaks. That QB sneak was dog shit.
Yeah, it's bad, man. It was bad.
It was bad.
He didn't get low at all. But also, I just want to comment. The rookie linebackers. I know 49ers throwback mentioned Jalen Graham, D Winters as well. These guys are fast. I was watching them fly around the field, man. I was impressed. I'm not gonna lie. It's like Warner and Greenlaw are really good in coverage and they're good side to side, but I don't think they have the speed that like a D Winters has.
Shout out to one more guy. I thought that Chris Conley did actually a really good job.
Yes.
He seemed to be a very steady pass catcher. He ran some really good routes and just overall looked good. I know that he received the best Trey Lance throw of the day, which was that he did it was like a 15-yard in route to the middle of the field in between zone, and he was the one that caught that. Yeah, absolutely, kind of worked himself into being right there for that 53. And, we need some of those wide receivers down towards the bottom of the depth chart, but I thought he did a good job. I thought Ronnie Bell did a good job. And that it was pretty nice. You just look up and you're like, all right, where's Danny Gray? Where did he go? And you just see, because you want to see that consistency. So yeah, that was pretty nice.
Yeah. And as far as other things that impressed me, then we'll get on to what we weren't so impressed by. Trey Lance's last drive, aside from the bad decision making on the first throw was a total Jimmy throw right to the linebacker. I don't know how he dropped that, but getting the team in position to score right before halftime. I think they got the ball with 33 seconds left, and he was able to drive the ball down. Unfortunately, Moody missed that 40-yard field goal. So I'm like, look, that was arguably one of the best drives from him, aside from the scoring drive. Can you hear me?
Nope, there you are. Yeah, you're moving.
Yeah, cut out for a second.
Now. Okay, no worries.
I lost power on my end, so I don't know if we're still having issues here earlier, but I think I'm back. But yeah, I was just talking about Trey Lance, that last drive before half. I was impressed by his ability to lead the team down into field goal range. Unfortunately, Moody didn't make it, but I was still impressed nonetheless.
I think it's a case of 2-minute drill, right? You're executing it in a way where you don't have to think so much about what you're doing. And I think that those more instinctual plays, and I believe in particular, there was a sweet throw that he had. And this was earlier on the touchdown drive, but it was more of the same, right? Where Trey Lance in structure, it kind of looks like a problem, like I said, on the dropbacks. But when he got out of structure and was using more of his instinctual play like that, it was like a jump pass to Willie Snead or whatever. Dude, that was nice. That was a nice play. And those are the kind of things you want to see. You don't want to see where he's airmailing it to Ross Dwelly out in the flat and it's 10 yards over his head. You don't want to see that. And Hung Fat, why do most QBs look more comfortable on 2-minute drills? I think it's because they call plays with limited reads and you're supposed to go to a certain area, and it's less about okay, I got 1, 2, 3, 4 reads and then go. It's just hey man, you got to make it work. And also it's when you're running, 2-minute drill. It's usually no huddle. The defense can't adjust their personnel. That gives the offense slightly more advantage. They know what play is coming, and the defense doesn't have as much time to react. I think all that kind of stuff plays into it. And I think that honestly, a lot of teams practice 2-minute drills a lot. So then it becomes more comfortable. The play packages are smaller. It's not like the full playbook. And so they're very familiar with those plays. And the more familiar you are with something, the less you have to think about it before you execute.
Yeah. Some things I wasn't impressed by that will wrap up the show. Look, I know
pass blocking,
first game preseason, obviously Kyle Shanahan probably doesn't put too much into it, but I was expecting a little more from the play calling aspect. Maybe some rollouts, get Trey Lance some easy dump off passes just to get that confidence going. He hadn't played football in like 11 months, right? Like, let's get some easy completions. And maybe that's what those first 3 passes were. And he just got sacked, unfortunately, before he could even get the ball out. But I was hoping, and we did end up seeing that. I think on the scoring drive, we saw him get out of the pocket, dump off a little pass to the running back. There was one, I want to say, to either Jordan Mason or TDP, was a screen pass, and the running back just dropped it. And there was so much room and blockers in front of him. Like, it would have been a huge gain. Unfortunately, he just dropped it. So I wasn't quite that impressed with the play calling for Trey Lance. I think it did get better towards the end. But again, how much of that is just him getting pressured before the play that Kyle Shanahan called to help him could have developed? I don't know. The offensive line was horrendous. Hopefully we never have to see that in an actual game. What was something that you weren't as impressed by, Matt?
Honestly, I wasn't impressed by just overall the effort. It looked like a lifeless affair out there. It didn't look like anybody came to play. By all accounts, the Raiders whooped up on the 49ers in joint practice. It just seems to be like, what are you doing out there if you're not it? I don't want to say it because it's just preseason. I don't want to, overreact or whatever, but it reeked of a team that has been reading its own press clippings and is going into the season expecting to be good and maybe not putting forth the effort that they need to get good. I also was a little disappointed that we didn't see more starters, considering you look around the league and there were other teams that played some starters. I'm thinking most notably of Patrick Mahomes, even though he played, just a little bit.
Broncos.
The Broncos. Well, the Broncos ran their people into like the second quarter, which was wild. I don't expect that level of, but to not even have like, Brock Purdy or somebody out there coming off of an injury to at least do like one. Yeah. And that tells me, I feel like Kyle Shanahan knows that backup blocking is kind of dog shit. And then people are saying in the chat, and I completely agree, Isaiah Oliver is not looking impressive. That was a free agent signing for the 49ers that had a lot of potential, and we'll see if it bears out, but he didn't look good. Yeah. I thought that Jair Brown looked a little lost in coverage at times. So overall, just a poor performance. Obviously disappointed in Jake Moody for, if you're a kicker and you're replacing somebody like Robbie Gould, who never missed in the playoffs, you can't have the yips like that in your first game. So hopefully he gets it together. Overall, I don't think it could have gotten worse for the 49ers other than like having horrific injuries, which I didn't see. It won't get much worse than this. It can't possibly get much worse than this. So going into preseason week 2, you hope for a better outcome. You hope to see a little more out of people. Probably some more starters will see the field a little bit, and then we'll go from there before they kind of like the dress rehearsal in preseason week 3. It's just interesting because the way the preseason is structured now with only 3 preseason games and then 2 weeks before your regular season opener, it's not as predictable as it used to be, right? Where it was like, okay, ramp up. 3rd game is dress rehearsal, and then the 4th game is kind of like a whatever. It does seem to be a little bit different. So, just was not pressed overall by the effort. And that starts at the top. That starts with coaching. So Kyle Shanahan, Steve Wilkes, they really need to get it together, because they can't go week. The team cannot afford another slow start to begin the season.
Yes.
None of this 3-4, none of this 4-4 stuff, because it's too critical to the 49ers to get home field advantage throughout the NFC playoffs to be, fiddling around with, whatever. They need to get on the ball. They need to stop believing their own hype, and they need to put forth the effort to be a championship football team.
Yes. Well said. I was just going to touch on that. We can't afford another slow start. And if this is Steve Wilkes kind of getting comfortable with what the 49ers are doing and how they coach this defense, hopefully he gets all those kinks out in the preseason. And once week one comes against the Steelers, we're all good. Um, it was a pretty ugly showing, and I agree with you. It just seemed like the effort wasn't there. And on the flip side, I mean, I heard reports that Josh McDaniels was like game planning for this game. They clearly wanted to win. And I don't know how much that is like pressure coming from Mark Davis. And after the debacle they had that was last season, there's a lot of pressure on McDaniels. So maybe that's where the difference was. But I want to see them put in a lot more this week 2 performance, preseason week 2 against the Broncos this Saturday evening. First time we see them since the infamous pick 8 that Jimmy Garoppolo dropped on them last year, excuse me. So we'll see how this goes. Hopefully it can't be worse than that, Matt. I think with all that said, that's going to wrap up this show. There was anything else you wanted to touch on that we didn't discuss from the game?
No, man. I mean, we just got to look forward to game number 2 Saturday against the Broncos. Not a lot you can take out of this performance, really, that's positive. The 49ers need to do a much better job, much better effort. I do think it'll be interesting to see how the quarterback position shakes out in terms of like online, now that we know what the deal is and what it's going to be. I think that some of the noise will quiet down now that it's pretty clear that Trey Lance is not going to start. And we'll see how the quarterback situation plays out in game 2. I'm interested to see who gets the bulk of the reps. Interested to see if Brock Purdy is going to play at all. He has no more practice restrictions, so I don't see why he wouldn't get a little bit of game time run, although stranger things have happened where the team takes excuses and doesn't play their starters. We might not see him till game 3. I would suspect he's going to play a little bit in the preseason, though, just to see him in game action. So it'll be interesting to see what happens going forward and who gets the start in Denver.
Yeah, I'm just excited, man. I'm happy football's back. And I'm going to leave you guys with this quote from John Lynch, speaking about Brock Purdy. He said, "There's not to say Brock's going to Canton, but Jimmy Johnson, you sit back and you listen to the speeches." And he presented Zach Thomas, who just got into the Hall of Fame. And he goes, "If you want to piss off Zach Thomas, call him an overachiever." He goes, because he wasn't the prototypical body and all that people thought he was, but the guy's a damn good athlete and a damn good football player. And I think that's where we're at with Brock. He's done it in a small sample size, but every indication is he's the guy. He's got it. High praise for a former Mr. Irrelevant. So we'll see if he can live up to it. Hopefully this Saturday it starts. With that all said, thank you everybody for tuning in. I know it's late this Tuesday evening, but we appreciate you guys. Matt, you want to carry us out?
Absolutely, man. Pretty big disaster preseason week 1. Nothing seemed to go the 49ers way. But, once you hit rock bottom, there's nowhere to go but up. Look for more effort, better effort in the next game against the Broncos. With that being said, we want to thank you for being here again on this Tuesday night. We love talking 49ers football, and, we look forward to the next time they're on the field. So for Zach and myself, that being said, until next time, go Niners.